More illegal aliens than any president ever has before. And he's determined to do that, and in ways that he was not in his first term.
The goal should be to deport every illegal in this country that we can find.
You've talked about prioritizing people who have criminal histories.
Correct.
But is it your plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it. And it's a very tough thing to do. But you have to have, you have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. Donald Trump and his allies have said what they plan to do. They will begin, quote, the largest deportation operation in American history by focusing first on deporting criminals. But once that is done, they will go after every undocumented immigrant in the country. That's their words. That includes people like Jaime Cachua. Jaime was brought to the United States illegally by his mom and dad when he was an infant, less than 1 year old. He's now 33 years old. He lives with his wife. He has 4 young children. There's some heart-wrenching new reporting in the New York Times about Cachua. Cachua describes his own personal story, one family story, a family in crisis now, trying to make sure that this man, Jaime, who has spent more than 3 decades as a law-abiding member of society in his community of Rome, Georgia, doesn't get deported when Trump comes into office next month. Quote, Jaime had never broken a law of any kind. He worked 50 hours a week at the dealership, drove below the speed limit, paid his taxes on time, and smoothed the creases out of books before returning them to the library. But no amount of adherence to the rules made up for the one thing he'd broken, the one rule he'd broken before he was old enough to walk or talk, when his family drove him across the border because his mother had found work at a chicken processing plant outside Rome, Georgia. More than 30 years later, his presence remains illegal. He was not eligible for Social Security or food stamps or unemployment benefits or any kind of health insurance he could afford. Cachua's father-in-law, Sky Atkins, who voted for Donald Trump partly because of his hardline immigration stance, couldn't understand how or that his family would be affected. Quote, all those criminals that Trump's been talking about, the rapists, the gang members, that's not you, Sky said. He'd heard Trump say that he would deport the bad guys first and possibly show leniency to immigrants who have been brought to the country as children. Quote, you deserve to be here, Sky said. To me, you're basically American. Quote, but I'm not, Jaime said. The Times reports Cachua's latest plan to travel back to Mexico to wait for paperwork and then re-enter the United States and then apply for legal residency. They tell the story about Jaime and his wife going to see an immigration lawyer. Times reports this, quote, Jaime and Jennifer drove out of Rome past the MAGA souvenir stand and toward the suburban Atlanta law office of Uriel Delgado. They gave him Jennifer's binder of evidence, the routine artifacts of a life in the United States, tax forms, school report cards, letters of support, car payments, mortgage documents, credit card bills. Quote, super organized, Delgado said. Quote, it's cut and dry, a perfect case. So it's easy, Jaime asked. Not exactly, Delgado said. He explained that Trump had equivocated over the years about how to treat DACA recipients, but now he was stalking his new administration with officials who are eager for mass deportations. Quote, right now, in terms of how alarmed I am about the next 4 years, I'd say the situation is a 9 out of 10. Told them about some of his other clients in the last few weeks, the daily panic he witnessed in his office, the desperation, the devastation, when all he had to offer were consolations and dead ends. Quote, so yeah, he said, make that a 10 out of 10. Even an easy case just got very hard. That extraordinary new piece of reporting about one man and one family and a father-in-law who voted for Donald Trump is where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. NBC News correspondent Jacob Sobroff is here. He's the executive producer of the movie Separated, based on his book of the same name about mass deportations and family separation during the first Trump administration. Separated will be available to download everywhere you rent movies tomorrow. Also joining us, former Assistant U.S. Attorney and President of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Maya Wiley's here. And with me at the table, distinguished political scholar and professor at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude. Jacob Soboroff, Jaime's story is so powerful because it's one family's story about their world being blown up 5 weeks ago on Election Day in America. And what's so unique is that it's this truism about Trump voters that the ones who vote against their own family's interest, his father-in-law, his daughter is married to Jaime, voted for Donald Trump. Your thoughts?
There are, that's one story. There are hundreds of thousands of stories potentially like that, Nicole, whether it's young people who received DACA and, as the article says, did everything right to make things right with an immigration system that they didn't knowingly violate, were brought here as children by no fault of their own, or are here with temporary protected status legally in the United States and allowed to be here because of a determination made by the same Department of Homeland Security that now may reverse course and kick them out of the United States of America. When you hear somebody like Ken Cuccinelli say, and I want to make sure that I got this right, more than any president ever in the history of the United States of America, we're not talking about just criminals, violent criminals. I think that there's a duty for the incoming Trump administration to define what criminal means. Does it mean a Jaime who crossed the border as a young child by no fault of his own and has been living life as a tax-paying, essentially, without just the name American citizen, a citizen of the United States, a neighbor to people like you and I, a schoolmate, a classmate, a coworker. Those stories are endless in this country. And when we talk about mass deportation, the greatest deportation effort in the history of the United States of America, orders of magnitude larger than Dwight D. Eisenhower's in 1954, it's why I say we're talking about family separation by another name. Families just like Jaime's are on the verge of getting broken up. They can say felons, not families, all they want. That was the refrain of the Obama administration as well, but they deported more people than any administration in the history of this country.
The Obama administration deported 2.9 million in Obama's first term, 1.9 million in his second. Let me read a little bit more from this reporting about Jaime. More than anger or fear, what Jaime had experienced most in the last several weeks was a rising sense of disorientation about the people he loved and the place he considered home. He lived all but the first year of his life in Rome, Georgia, a riverside town of 40,000 in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. He was a customer service specialist at the local car dealership, a worship team volunteer at church, and the host of family barbecues in his neighborhood cul-de-sac. But lately, the trucks at his dealership were festooned with Trump flags. His church group was discussing the sanctity of borders, and his neighborhood was lined with political signs, including one that read, "Start shipping off illegals now." More than 70% of voters in surrounding Floyd County had chosen Trump and his mass deportations, including many of Jaime's friends and family members. This is about his father-in-law. Quote, "I'm going to be straight with you," Sky Atkins told Jaime. "I voted for Trump. I believe in a lot of what he says." Quote, "I figured as much," Jaime said. "You and just about everyone else around here." Quote, "It's about protecting our rights as a sovereign country," Sky said. "We need to shut down the infiltration on the border. It's not about you." Quote, "It is about me," Jaime said. "That's the thing I don't understand."
It is about Jaime. And something else stuck out to me about what his father-in-law, Sky, said to him in that article. Nicole, and I'm so glad that you're highlighting this. He said, "Nobody's putting you on a bus unless they get by me." This is Sky, the father-in-law, saying this to Jaime, the undocumented family member. Well, guess what? That's just simply not true. The idea that you can stand in between an undocumented family member and the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, coming to find people, according to the reporting of Julia Ainsley, in places potentially like workplaces and schools, houses of worship, places that we once thought that were once protected by the U.S. government. Those days may be numbered if reporting like Julia has done and others bears out to be true. And there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't be. Julia and others reported that family separation was under consideration in the earliest days of the Trump administration. They ripped apart 5,500 children deliberately from their parents, deported thousands of those parents without their children, so that today, as I talk to you, 1,360 of those children don't have confirmed the reunifications. Now we're talking about a program on the scale of millions, not just thousands. And it's people like Sky and Jaime and these mixed status families that could be first to experience this firsthand.
I keep thinking about the power of a story, one family. And I'm grateful to have this reporting now. But I wonder if people feel the way Jaime's father-in-law does. You know, not you. They're not talking about you. They're talking about some faceless, nameless other. They're talking about Jaime, his son-in-law.
Absolutely. I think this is what happens when we lose sight of the human being.
Yeah.
And we traffic in the category. What does it mean to call a human being illegal? Illegal aliens are threatening the border. And so the image in Sky Atkins' mind, right, is this image of this monstrous figure who, MS-13, who's threatening, not his son-in-law. And so when you traffic in these kind of stereotypes, these abstracted categories designed to cultivate hatred and grievance, you end up signing on unwillingly, right, to the disruption of people you love, to people that you don't think could get caught up in this. And I think this is a part of the insidious work of what's going on. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, what will this mass deportation policy ask of us? Right? What will we have to concede to and consent to in the midst of what will be a horrible, horrible event?